Hello, and I'm here this weekend to steal your fiance and make her my wife. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Disney month, and this week we are talking the 1997 film Flubber. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my absent-minded co-host, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am.
What is your history with this film? I mean, we're both millennials. We're both, I think, the perfect age to remember this movie and have it be part of our childhood. But was it something you watched a lot growing up, have seen recently at all before this episode of the podcast?
Not really. This came out in 97, so I was 10. So I was probably, like you said, definitely in the right age demographic for who this was going after. Apologies to my dad if I'm speaking on a line, but I don't think he was the biggest Robin Williams fan. So I didn't watch a whole lot of his movies growing up. Like, I know Hook was around, but like this is not one that was on a lot. I know I saw it at some point, just like sheer diffusion, if anything else. But like, it's not something I had a heavy relationship with. But I know I'd seen it before. Like, even if it was like at school or something, like you had that movie day at school where somebody brought in Flubber, and but yeah, not a huge staple of my childhood in any way, and not something I've watched in a long time before coming back to it for this. So I was interested in definitely revisiting it and seeing, you know, what did I remember, what didn't I remember, which is a lot. And just, yeah, seeing what was up, man.
I'm in pretty much the same boat. I definitely saw this as a youngin'. I don't know if it's in theaters, on video. I probably saw it a few times, but man, I probably have not seen this movie since the 1990s. Definitely.
Yeah.
Until we watched it this week for this episode. I thought I didn't remember a whole lot, but when I rewatched it, I was like, man, I did not remember a whole lot. Because Andrew, let me tell you something up top here. This is a weird movie. This movie is straight up bonkers, I would say.
This movie is insane. It is. There's no, and like, this isn't like a hashtag PP thing. Like, this is just an extremely weird movie. Like, there just really is no other way to describe it. It is just a, you know, they say things like they don't make them like that no more. They don't make them like this anymore. And I'm not going to say whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it's this movie, some of the places this movie goes, I never saw coming. Like, and it was just ridiculous.
Like, I remembered he was like an inventor and he invented Flubber and it was really bouncy. Like, that's what I remembered. And he was like finding applications to use his bouncy material. I didn't think I would be considering the ethics of an AI human romance in the middle of this movie. I did not see that coming. I did not remember that subplot. I didn't remember these Home Alone style burglary attempts with shenanigans and it's so weird. Look, we're gonna get to it. That's what we do here. We're gonna talk about all the best parts, all the positives, everything that works in this bonkers film. But let's set the stage a little bit before we get there. We are in the middle of Disney month. And this week we're talking about Disney remakes. And we intentionally didn't want to do, like, you know, currently Disney has done a lot of remakes of their animated films, mostly CG remakes or live action remakes of previously traditionally animated movies. Jungle Book, Lion King,
Cinderella,
Beast,
Little Mermaid, Beast, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely like in vogue. And I mean, I would say they're getting a lot of flack for it. Like, there's definitely chatter online about Disney's nothing but remakes and nothing creative, blah, 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 all the usual stuff you hear. But all these movies make like $1 billion. Like, no one's really.
It's truly ridiculous.
I think maybe Dumbo is the only one that's like financially a disappointment. I don't think it flopped or anything, but Other than that, like Aladdin, like made over $1 billion, and everyone was like, speaking of Robin Williams, people just couldn't believe someone else was going to play the genie, and then had this and that to say about it, and everyone went and saw it anyway. So, I just really want to dive into that whole era, because for the most part, I don't have a problem with those movies. I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I've seen, I think they're totally fine, if not straight up good. I think the Jungle Book, the new one, is really good. But also, I think I kind of wanted to illustrate that, like, this is definitely nothing new. Disney remaking its own material, its own movies. I mean, in the 90s, we had a live action remake of 101 Dalmatians, and like Glenn Close has become synonymous with Cruella de Vil because of that remake of an animated classic. And this movie here, Flubber, is a remake of The Absent-Minded Professor. And I think what's interesting is, like, both of those movies, to remake 101 Dalmatians or Flubber or whatever else they're remaking in the 90s from the era where the originals came out, it's the same thing as remaking movies from the 80s and 90s in the 2010s and 2020s. Like, it's just as long of a gap. Like, it feels, being, again, our age, being millennial,
I was actually
the fact that we were there when the originals came out, it feels like sacrilegious for a remake already, but it's like the same time period as they've always done. 20 to 30 years, you get a new movie.
Like, I was looking at this. So The Absent-Minded Professor comes out in 1961, and Flubber comes out in 1997. That's 36 years. And The Little Mermaid came out, I think, in 1989, and that remake came out this year, which is 33 years. So the gap between The Absent-Minded Professor and Flubber is essentially the same as the gap between The Little Mermaid and The Little Mermaid. Now, the obvious assumption and difference there is that the adults today remember seeing The Little Mermaid and probably have a much stronger attachment to it than adults in the 90s did at seeing The Absent-Minded Professor. There's a weird discussion there of how our generation has latched on to the media of our childhood in a much deeper way than previous generations did, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I'm just saying, like, there really isn't that much of a difference.
Andrew, no tangents on this podcast. We cannot get off topic here and start talking about how the advent of home media and cable television becoming the norm in the 90s has led our generation to have an attachment to our childhood media, and for movies to stay in the zeitgeist for a longer period of time so they feel more holy and special to us in our adulthood, and we have a much more visceral reaction to it being messed with, whether it be a legacy sequel or a remake, and we have the ability to discuss it on a global scale with the internet. We can't talk about that right now.
We really can't. There's just no time to dive into even the socio-political impact of home video, especially in the 80s, and how there was a weird class of filmmakers from the 50s and the 60s that were fans of films but didn't have access to the home media access that the filmmakers of today have. This is how you end up with a generation of current filmmakers that are fans in a way that, even though people making movies in the 70s, 80s were always fans of films, they're different, because when they were kids, they didn't get to hang on to the films they saw. They didn't get to do that, and now they do. We're in this era now where everyone wears their fandoms on their sleeves, and the advent of home media is a huge part of that. And I know we definitely don't have the time or space to talk about that.
Nor can we discuss Gen Z growing up in a time of streaming media where they have access to more media than any generation before them. But because of that amount of access, they are not as singularly attached to specific media. They're much more likely to turn around onto the next hot thing. They don't go back, even though they have access to movies of past decades from the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, they are not seeking out older media because there's constantly new media to latch onto. So what is that going to mean as that generation ages into adulthood and becomes the creators and the consumers in this economy? We really don't know and just don't have time to discuss it here.
Yeah. This
movie, Flubber, was released November 26th of 1997. Made on a budget of $80 million. I was surprised to see how big that budget was. At the box office, it brings in $178 million. So we got a hit here. It's making us money back. It's financially successful. However, critically, not well received. It holds just a 23% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and even the audience score isn't much higher at 33%. We mentioned at the end of our episode last week that Flubber, it was a hit. Everyone knew about it. It was Robin Williams, but it just didn't have any kind of tale or legacy, good or bad. I don't hear people talking about it saying like, man, that was a weird, dumb movie that was a hit, or they're particularly nostalgic about it. It kind of just falls off after a few years, and we all seem to move on from this weird thing.
And that happened a lot. I mean, people talk about now, you know, it's something that's sort of come up where, like, you look at the highest grossing films the years come out, and, you know, we have that one year that always kind of shocks me. I think it's 99 or 2000, where What Lies Beneath is one of the top 10 highest grossing films of the year. Nobody ever thinks about What Lies Beneath, ever. But it was so popular when it came out that it made a lot of money. And then also you look at the numbers of the money back then that put it in the top 10 highest grossing films of the year, and you can see that, like,
yeah, a few $100,000 and you're ranking up there.
Right. Like, you know, that movie made like $150 million and it was 10th for the year.
Oh yeah, I said 1,000. I meant a few $100 million, but yeah, you
like,
get the idea.
Nowadays, if you don't even approach $1 billion, you're not even close. You're not even in the conversation. And so but also you look at What Lies Beneath, and it's Michelle Pfeiffer's Harrison Ford, like bona fide movie stars, directed by Robert Zemeckis, in a horror movie essentially, and it's a top 10 highest grossing film of the year, but yet nobody ever thinks about it. But that really is, on one piece, speaking to how this sort of thing happened a lot, where you'd put movie stars into a movie, it would make money, and then it would just kind of vanish. But it also just speaking to the greater value of what the movie star was, where Robin Williams being in a movie, people went and saw it. All it had to have was Robin Williams in it, and people were going to go. And that's, you know, people have pointed to that as being one of the other current failures of the modern cinematic model, is that there are no real people like that anymore. There are fandoms, sure, and there are people like, but like nobody's being set up like Robin Williams was in the 80s and the 90s. Nobody's being set up like even Tom Cruise or Jim Carrey. They're not getting these like vehicles that are just for them to turn them into these bankable names. So it's this weird sense of like there's no movie stars. And this stuff is just indicative that there was a time that that's all you needed. Like, you had a famous person in your movie, people went to see it. There was a brief period of time people thought Chris Pratt was entering that orbit, because it seemed like there was a period of time where if you put Chris Pratt in a movie, people went to see it. It did not last. I think Passengers killed that one. But it's an odd thing, and I think Flubber is definitely an impact of that, where it was Robin Williams in a movie that the whole family could see, no less. You know, that's gonna, you know, you want to go to the movies for the weekend with a movie you know your kids are going to enjoy and can watch, you go see Flubber. It seems like that's exactly what happened.
Let's take a look at the creative team. The movie is written by John Hughes and Bill Walsh, which is an interesting credit.
Can't say I'm familiar with John Hughes. Has he done anything I know?
Alum of the show, he wrote a movie called Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. We covered that on this podcast. It's probably
doesn't ring any bells.
Your point of reference. Even though that's maybe like fifth on the thing he's most known for. I mean, John Hughes' credits are just absolutely insane. He's got this whole career as a comedy writer. Things like Mr. Mom, National Lampoon's Vacation, The Great Outdoors, Baby's Day Out. If you remember that one from the 90s, that's another bonkers movie.
I do.
But otherwise, probably most known, despite all those great credits, for his writer-director efforts in high school teen movies like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, like, in either of those spaces, it's enough to make him like a bona fide Hollywood legend with his writing credits or his writer-director credits. But the fact that one man did all of that, the comedies, the high school coming-of-age stories, and the straight up family films. I mean, very talented man. This movie, Flubber, comes out during a period where he was hermit's too strong of a word, but he like famously pulled away from the public eye in the mid 90s, but continued working. He just did it outside of Hollywood, didn't really do interviews, very rarely appeared in public until his death. So R.I.P. John Hughes, definitely passed away too young, but leaves behind just a stellar legacy that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm sure we absolutely talked about this on Home Alone 2, but like you said, his legacy speaks for itself. Yeah, 59, just so, like, my parents are both older than 59. It always freaks me out when people die at ages younger than my parents are. And but like, you just look through his list of credits. I mean, I did not realize he had the sole writing credit for Home Alone 3.
Yeah, I didn't think I figured he would be like producer or story by then, but it's crazy.
But he has, well, like you said, it's kind of interesting because like Home Alone 2 is like arguably his last hit, which is so weird to think about because like everything after
Flubber
that
was a hit. What are you talking about? We're talking about one of his hits today.
All right, Flubber was his last hit. But like you start getting after Home Alone, the hits get a lot more less certain.
Sure. Yeah.
And by like I said, and then by like 90, I mean after this, he has Home Alone 3 that also comes out the same year, and then from then until his death, he only writes 2 more movies and then has story credit on 2 more, including Made in Manhattan. The Jennifer Lopez, is that Matthew McConaughey? No. Ray Fiennes. My boy, Ray Fiennes. As well as Tucci Gang in there. But yeah, it's an interesting career, but the kind of seclusion that he goes into just is become kind of a it became kind of legendary. People would try to reach out to him to do interviews, and he really didn't do it very much. People would reach out and be like, "Hey, we'd like to interview you for this," and he'd be like, "I'm good, man." And so he became kind of notorious. Notorious isn't really a word, infamous really, but like just that kind of to be so high profile and then to almost completely withdraw from the public eye. People are it baffled and interested a lot of people. His last credit is Drill Bit Taylor, which has a story credit by John Hughes and then a writing credit from Seth Rogen. So if you ever want to watch a weird thing that somehow John Hughes and Seth Rogen are both responsible for, you watch Drill Bit Taylor starring Owen Wilson.
This podcast goes on long enough. We will talk about it.
I wouldn't actually suggest it, but
hashtag PP.
Wild. But just wild.
The other writing credit on here is Bill Walsh, and here's the thing about Bill Walsh: he died in 1975. Yep. I've never seen anything like this before. Bill Walsh was his Disney guy. He's got credits, mostly producing and a lot of co-writing credits in the 60s and 70s on a number of films. That Darn Cat, The Absent-Minded Professor, its sequel, Son of Flubber, which I didn't know existed until I was researching for this movie. And so I guess that's how he gets credit here, just because it's a remake and they use so much of his original ideas from that movie that he deserves a writing credit. But I've never seen this before on a remake, even remakes that, stick really close to the source material. I never see the past writer retain credit, especially after they've died. So this is a new one for me. But
especially for Disney. Disney seems weird, like they would be wholly opposed. Not to, I'm not trying to get into the arguments there over writing credits or anything, but like it definitely feels like Disney not keeping someone's name on something would be something they would be about. But yeah. I was kind of shocked by that. And because normally you'll see like based on a previous screenplay by X. or you'll see like based on characters created by. I always love when like Home Alone 2 is a great example because it's written by John Hughes. So in the opening credits, it literally has written by John Hughes and also based on characters created by John Hughes. He gets credited twice. And so I would assume we would have gotten something like that, like based off the original 1961 feature film, The Absent-Minded Professor, written by Bill Walsh. But we don't get that. He actually gets a full-on writing credit here. And that's kind of wild. Now, Walsh was a huge part of Disney. This may have just been like a weird legacy thing where like they wanted to honor him, or maybe he had some weird contract thing where he was like, if you remake anything I've done or you reuse one of my scripts or whatever, I have no idea. But yeah, I have never seen anything like that also. To have them just credited as a writer. Except to be clear, like based on characters created by stuff like that, very common. But yeah, that one was wild.
And then the film is directed by Les Mayfield. You know, I love when a director has a filmography that is concise enough I can just run through the whole thing on this show. Here's every movie directed by Les Mayfield. Encino Man in 1992.
Heck yeah.
Miracle on 34th Street in 1994. Flubber in 1997. Blue Streak in 1999. American Outlaws. Remember that one? Colin Farrell, Scott Conn?
Yeah.
2001. The Man in 2005. And then Codename The Cleaner in 2007. We're looking at 2 and 3 year turnarounds. I mean, from 92, or you assume production maybe started in 91, to 2007, the man is constantly working on Hollywood feature films. And then just drops the mic. Currently retired. I think did some small work after that last film, but just in and out. Put in a solid, 15 years, and then they're done. Respect.
So, I want to point out something here that I just noticed looking into this, and I was curious because you will notice that it specifies that I don't know if you've read through the Flubber page there, but it specifies that this was the second film that Les Mayfield had directed, written from John Hughes, the first one being Miracle on 34th Street. Now, I went and looked at Miracle on 34th Street, and that movie does the same thing this one does. There is a writing credit.
Writer?
There is a writing credit on that movie for George Seaton, who died in 1979, because George Seaton wrote the 1947 Miracle on 34th Street. So for some weird reason,
do you think it's a John Hughes thing? Do you think he has respect for the work he's adapting? That he is like, hey, they deserve possible.
Credit? Maybe because that the fact that it's the only 2 instances that I even know about are ones that he wrote. It's very possible. It's very possible that he's like they wrote the original scripts, the whole story. I mean, because it's not wrong. Both movies largely follow the same stories. The plot is already written. And so even if you're updating it to be like modern vernacular, changing the relationships, that story is unchanged. And so I could easily see John Hughes being the kind of guy that's like, I'm not, I wrote this version, but you can't deny the script came from these guys. And I don't disagree with him there at all. But Encino Man, heck yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we'll talk about Les Mayfield again on this
one day
for sure.
Sooner versus later, folks.
More Mayfield. Right?
All right. Shut up.
One last note about Les Mayfield. Born November 30th, 1959. So they share a birthday with Ben Stiller and co-host of this podcast, Chris Logan.
I knew that.
Yeah. I like finding common birthdays. All right, Andrew, it's time that we jump into this film. Everything we like, all the positives about the wild, wild movie that is Flubber. Are you ready?
Yes.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have.
The best of the rest.
Professor Philip Brainard works at a college that is on the verge of closing, and in his spare time, works as an inventor in his basement. When he creates a synthetic life form named Flubber, he is so excited by his discovery that he forgets to attend his own wedding. Philip works to market his new invention by finding practical uses for a material that greatly increases the energy it receives, and win back his former fiancée Sarah in the process. Standing in his way is the powerful father of a student he is failing, and an ex-colleague determined to steal everything from Philip, including his love interest. What? Like, 5 minutes into this movie, if that, he misses his own wedding. She's like, this is the third time you've done this. I can't do this anymore. Shooter McGavin walks onto the screen and is like, I'm going to steal your invention and your woman. Like, the stakes ratchet up so quickly in the first, 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. It just never lets up, Andrew. It's a weird one. It's a weird movie.
It's extremely weird. There's no other way to describe it. The colleague trying to steal his fiance is specified very early. The other villain plot comes a little bit later, but yeah, it's wild, man.
It's not like he's just, kind of a shady guy who turns into an ultimate villain. Like, his first meeting with him we see on screen, he says that line he used in the beginning, I'm going to steal your fiance, make her my wife. Like, it's just, we're just going hard from the beginning.
We are.
And that role played so well. We're going to talk about it, of course, because what we're going to do now is talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point, the best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting a Mark Strong Award for Flubber?
Is there anybody but Robin Williams? I mean,
it's Robin Williams.
It has to
there's
be. No question. Like, there's absolutely zero question. He's got the. I don't
he's
mean
the
to
reason
get too
you watch
sad.
the movie.
Yeah, he's the movie star. He's the reason you watch it. But I apologize if I get a little melodramatic on this, but I realized I've never really watched seriously anything Robin Williams has done since he passed, which has been a long time to go without watching something he was in. And there's just this inherent sadness I feel seeing him on screen. Like, because you see the manic energy and you see the wholesomeness of these characters, and makes it all the more heartbreaking what was actually happening with the man. And this movie's no exception. He goes from that manic comedic energy that you expect from him all the time, whether it's even going all the way back to Mork and Mindy or whatever it is, and then you get this dramatic side that shines through as well. There's a complete range you get of him as an actor in this movie, and it's what holds it together. Like, everybody else in this movie's fine. Like, we'll talk more about them. Like Christopher McDonald, all of them, they're fine. They're doing exactly the things you would expect them to do. They're all cast pretty perfectly for their roles. But if a lesser actor is in Robin Williams' role, this movie is nothing. It's out. It's the definition of a person who's taking this movie and elevating it from what otherwise might be a completely fine but generally forgettable film into something that you're going to go see because Robin Williams is in it. And he just does a great job with the whole thing. There's dramatic scenes here where he genuinely makes it work. There's a scene where he's mourning a robot. And you're like, why is Robin Williams making me sad about this? How is he doing that?
Yeah.
And then you contrast that with manic scenes like where he's testing out the Flubber stuff on a basketball court. And you're seeing that manic energy that you just come to expect from the man. And it is just something to behold. And you realize watching him back that there really wasn't anybody quite like him. And that's what makes it all the harder to watch it sometimes. And I need to stop talking about this or I'm going to cry. So I'm gonna.
I agree. I agree with all your points here, and I'm in the same boat. I don't think. I don't know. I feel he passed away in 2014. I feel like I had to have seen
there's no way. Yeah,
since
it was
then.
the same. It's like there's no way I've gone 10 years without watching a Robin Williams movie, right? But at the same time, I kind of feel like I might have.
I think exactly.
Even if it wasn't like
I have.
Even if I wasn't intending to do it, I think my brain, maybe it was my brain saving me from myself of like, don't do it. It's going to make you sad. So it was just like, let's watch something else instead. But
yeah. First just talking about, Mark Strong awards in his career, especially his 90s run, but up and down his career. Jumanji, Mrs. Doubtfire, Flubber here, Patch Adams, Bicentennial Man. Is there anyone else in any of those movies standing a chance to win the Mark Strong? I really don't think so. It's like Jim Carrey's run in the 90s, like these movies revolve around their energy and their performance. They are the thing that makes the movie special, the definition of the Mark Strong Award. So yeah, easily getting it here in Flubber. His physical comedy, you think about, obviously the Flubber is CG and he's just acting off of himself for all those scenes, and he does it so well. And there's not a warmer smile in the world. Like, his smile is so genuine. I just always thought that about it. He just says so much with his kind eyes and a smile. And you're right. It's impossible to watch that stuff now. In the back of your mind, know that we lost this man to suicide. It's a complicated one. It's to depression, but depression was a symptom of a late stage diagnosis that he received, possibly an incorrect diagnosis that wasn't fully understood until after his death. It's really sad stuff. His wife straight up says it's entirely the disease that killed him, not necessarily that he was just a depressed man, but that was a symptom of it. But it's nothing but tragic, no matter how you look at it. Just with how talented he was, and like we're saying, just how genuine and happy he was. And yeah, it was, you can't watch it without having that in the back of your mind. And it's tough. Even though it's been this long. We recently lost Matthew Perry, who on the global scale, probably isn't as resident with as many people as Robin Williams was. But for me personally, that's like my guy. And I don't know if I will get to a point or how long it's going to be before I can watch his work again. It's Fools Rush In, one of my all-time favorite movies. It will make me incredibly sad to try to watch it now. So it's a tough thing, especially, losing anyone, quote unquote, before the time, always going to be tough. But whenever that person was just renowned for their comedy and their kindness and what they bring, the happiness they bring, it's just extra tough. It's just no way around it. No. So yeah, 2 emphatic Mark Strong awards for Robin Williams at the surprise of absolutely no one. He is the reason you watch the movie. But I don't want to speak too backhandedly about the rest of the cast. Just because they aren't taking the Mark Strong award from Robin Williams, it just means that they are merely human. We have Marcia Gay Harden as our love interest here, Dr. Sarah Reynolds, the woman that he forgets to go to the wedding 3 times, maybe 4 times. It's unclear at the very end if he forgot or if they prearranged for him to be there via video conference. It's so weird, Andrew.
It's so weird.
So weird.
So
they don't live together even. So it's like they've attempted 3 weddings and he just forgets. It's a weird movie. Marcia Gay Harden is great. Just a fantastic character actor. Since the late 80s, has just been working nonstop. She's one of those. I guess we need a better name for this. Cause I want to say that guy actors. It's that guy because you've seen him in 5 different things. She's that gal actress, I guess. Some standouts for me, The Mist movie I absolutely love. She has a very memorable performance as a very unlikable character in that movie. She also has a recurring role in Law and Order SVU. I think her character's name is Star, if I remember correctly. And again, you kind of hate her at first before you kind of come around. and she plays it so well. Just kills it anytime she shows up. This one, no exception. Although I will say, if he forgets to show up to your wedding 3 times, you've given him too many chances already. What are we doing here?
Yeah, there's a whole Anyway, she's fantastic. I remember her from Miller's Crossing, probably one of the first things that comes to mind. One of the earlier Coen Brothers films. I remember her from Space Cowboys. She's in that one, and I even recently saw her in Confess Fletch, the Fletch reboot, rejigging, whatever you want to call it, starring John Hamm. And she's just fantastic. She's been all over the place. She's in all the 50 Shades of Grey movies, apparently, which, get that money. But you've seen her in something. Absolutely. You've 100% seen her in something. And she brings a lot of very justifiable resentment to her character, which she feels towards Robin Williams' character, because she feels forgotten, which is true, completely true. And it turns out there might be a little bit more to it than things would indicate, which is later brought to her attention. And then when she's with him and it's genuine and you can see that empathy and that love that the characters have for each other, and she does a fantastic job bringing that through and making it feel very real, and it's all fantastic. And she gets to be a big part of our finale as well, which is always fun to not see these characters kind of have to sit on the sidelines the whole time.
Christopher McDonald as Wilson Croft. I mean, look, if there was someone else maybe on the Mark Strong Award radar, I think he might be one of them. I know you like your villain, so I know you probably had that thought too, but of course he's in a movie with Robin Williams, so it's not going to happen, but I love this performance anyway. He, like I said, no bones about it from the moment he walks on screen. He is a bad guy. He is smarmy. He is a villain. This performance reminds me of course, of his role as Shooter McGavin in Happy Gilmore, but also of Thomas Hayden Church in George of the Jungle. I got a lot of those vibes.
Yeah.
Just
Lyle.
Real preppy.
Lyle Vandergroot.
Yes. But I love it. I mean, what is... God, another character actor who's been in a million things, but he's Shooter McGavin at the end of the day, right? I mean, that's just a role he can't escape from.
There's no question.
Is Christopher McDonald the Mark Strong of Happy Gilmore? Does he take that one from Adam Sandler?
No, Bob Barker takes it from them both. I don't want a piece. I want the whole thing.
That is great.
I mean, he's Christopher McDonald. He was recently just in Secret Invasion. I mean, so he's still out there doing stuff. Like, he is still very much out there being a character actor. He shows up in a couple of episodes of one of my favorite sitcoms called Happy Endings as 2 of the characters' dad. He shows up with Julie Haggerty as their mom. He was from the Airplane movies, amongst other things. But he just has that right energy. Like, if you told me, hey, Shooter McGavin's going to guest star on this show as the hardened, hard-to-impress father of 2 characters, that's kind of a jerk. I would be like, yeah, perfect casting. That's exactly what he is. He has a type of character that he plays extremely well. And most casting agencies have a really good... knack at putting him in the right spots, and even just
we need a jerk in khakis. I've got just the right guy for you.
You're not going to believe this, but then even last year, apparently, just got nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award. So still getting some chances at some hardware too. So putting in the work, putting in some good performances, but he's another guy that, like, even if you haven't seen Happy Gilmore, you've seen this guy somewhere.
And then we have Jodie Benson as the voice of Weebo. Weebo is it's Professor Brainard's assistant, who's like a flying robot, but I don't think they ever used the word AI, but clearly has like an AI program inside of it, because she's capable of full speech and comprehension. On top of being able to speak, also communicates with clips from old movies, which I thought was interesting. You'd expect that from a robot that is incapable of speaking, but she just does both. She says what's on her mind, and she shows us a little clip, usually from a Disney feature.
Notice that, did you?
Across. Yeah. Although there was a Simpsons clip in there, which is now under the Disney umbrella, but
wasn't at the time.
In 1997. Interesting. Jodie Benson is primarily a voice. I mean, she does live action too, but most known probably for her first voice work, including voicing Ariel from The Little Mermaid. So very high profile stuff up and down. Great get for your Flubber movie to voice the flying robot. And this character is part of a side plot in this movie because Weibo is in love with Professor Brainard and is trying to communicate that love to him throughout the movie. And she can't be everything he needs because she's just a robot. So she creates a hologram of herself of what she would look like as a human, and approaches him in his bed while he's sleeping. It's a wild one. If you're listening to this and you haven't rewatched the movie, am I blowing your mind? That happens in this movie. Speaking of the hologram, I do want to shout out Leslie Stevenson, who plays the hologram. It's still voiced by Jodie whenever she's the hologram, but she is an actor who's been in a number of things, but one thing that stood out to me was Unbreakable. She is the woman on the train in the very first scene of Unbreakable, where Bruce Willis is sitting next to her and they're talking about sports, and then he tries to flirt with her and she's like, "Oh, I'm married," and then she changes seats. That's her. That's her hologram here. And man, I've got to rewatch Unbreakable. It's been a long time. I got to go back. I love it.
It's just really good. They never made any sequels to that.
I mean, I feel like Split people are pretty on board with. I saw it. I liked it. I have not seen Glass, but I know that reception is not as great. Andrew, is it insane that we're like 100, almost 140 episodes in? We haven't done an M. Night Shyamalan movie yet?
It's pretty wild. That gives me a chance.
We could do an M. Night month, right?
Absolutely. That brings me to a very interesting thing I want to mention real quick, because we're talking about M. Night. And I know we just established that there's no tangents on this show.
No, we don't do tangents on the show. We have no time.
But anyway,
tell people what we don't have time for, Andrew.
So I don't have time to tell you guys about how The Sixth Sense is such a wild movie, because we all watched that. Sorry, folks, I'm about to spoil the 25-year-old movie, The Sixth Sense, however old it is. So we all had no idea that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. And
I can't believe you just spoiled 50 First Dates, Andrew.
And it's so wild to me because that movie literally opens with him getting shot. And we spend that whole movie just assuming that his wife hasn't talked to him for like a year. And we think that's the more plausible outcome than he got shot and died. So I'm just like, how many people watch Sixth Sense and we're just like, I get what this guy's going through. This is a movie about marriage. This is a movie about how relationships are hard. This is a movie all about how, you know, we're trying to all figure it out, and how even if you get shot, it's your fault. Like, it's just, you can't win. But like, it's one of those movies you watch, like, but that's true for a lot of, like, even the movies that M. Night does that work. Once you know the twist, like, it ruins the whole thing, basically. Like, you can't, like, you'll never rewatch the movie the same. So, like, you go back and you watch it knowing that he's dead. And you're like, oh, yeah, the movie opened with him getting shot. Like, why? How did we not see that? You say that,
but no one, we didn't, though. We didn't. I mean, we were pretty young at the time, but adults didn't either. Like, that was a huge deal. But it does see, like, it gives you all the pieces, which I do appreciate. Like, I got to rewatch The Sixth Sense now. I don't think
it just literally, like, smacks you over the head in the first scene with the dude got shot. But yet, like I said, and that's mostly a joke. I'm mostly joking, folks. I'm aware that the movie goes to great lengths to make you not necessarily think Bruce Willis is dead. But, like, it is wild to me to look back on that movie and think of
it's Donnie. You know what it is? It's Donnie Wahlberg in those whitey tighties. It just scrambles your brain. So, like, you kind of block that part out.
You got nothing. You can't recover from that at that point. But yeah, anyway, that was my M. Night rant. But yeah, we could absolutely have a whole M. Night month
I mean, we
corner
don't
at
have
this
time.
point.
We don't have time to plan it out right now, but we don't have time to say it would have to be The Village, Lady in the Water, The Happening, and
Airbender.
God, Airbender.
I would do Old before Airbender because I just don't think I can do Airbender to myself.
Plus, The Last Airbender qualifies for a lot of other things too, like live action
Yeah.
remake of a cartoon series or TV show adaptation.
You know what though?
so.
Here's what I'm gonna say. Here's what I'm gonna say in defense of M. Night. First off,
Oh, I'm a big M. Night defender. You don't go ahead, but
Anyway. first off, almost everything's original. Like we live in an era where everyone laments that it's all sequels, it's all IPs, it's all remakes. Almost everything he does is an original script. Couple of exceptions like Airbender, things like that, but by and large, everything is his. Secondly, he keeps getting offered to make movies from studios. He'd be an idiot to say no. Like, there's absolutely no reason. So, you know what? Does it always work for me? No. But am I glad that he's out there doing it? Yes. Yes, I am. And you should be too.
I agree. I mean, I haven't seen his whole filmography. If I had to guess, he's batting at about a 500 for my rankings, which, hey, it's better than a lot of other guys. And like you said, he is. I'm going to use the word. He's an auteur. He writes and directs. He has a vision. He has a style that is unmistakably his, and his hits are. I mean, when it works, it friggin' works. So, yeah, we'll get there. We don't have time to talk about it now, but M. Night Month is coming. That's a threat. That's a promise. However you want to take it. It's going to happen. Let's take a look at the rest of this cast. Andrew, Raymond J. Barry plays Chester Hoenicker. Another character actor here. Movies like Falling Down, Cool Runnings, Dead Man Walking, and of course, the character of Pa Cox in Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Wrong kid died.
Yeah. Is that... I'm not trying to talk backhandedly. That's got to be like the best line of his entire career, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, because I say this as nicely as I can. He is the type of characters he plays do not typically have a lot of comedy in them. Like when I think of the stuff even in this movie, he's he's smarmy, and there's a little bit of I won't know what it is. Maybe a charisma slightly. He's like a guy who knows he's going to get away with stuff, so he's kind of cocky about it.
Yeah.
But like, there's not a lot of comedy to it. Even Cool Runnings, which is the thing that I probably most associate him with. He's just like straight up a jerk in that movie. Like there's no shades to it. He's just the guy that hates the Jamaicans for not the awful reasons. Although it's probably the awful reasons. He's like, they don't belong here. You care to expand on that? Like, he keeps changing the rules.
The
so they
snow,
qualify.
Andrew, they don't belong in snow. Right? Don't take that any other way.
Of course, my mistake. But in Walk Hard, he's actually like thrown into comedic situations and is able to kind of do things that leave an impression. So I would absolutely agree that that's got to be the line of his career. The wrong kid died. There's no way that's not. So I agree.
Clancy Brown plays Smith and Ted Levine play Wesson. And I put them together because they are the henchmen of Mr. Hoenicker. They're always on screen together. They're always... I mean, all the Home Alone shtick in this movie is happening to these guys, getting attacked by flubberized golf balls and showing up with big knots on their head and throwing a punch and accidentally hitting each other. We see it all. Cartoon sound effects. We talked about Clancy Brown way back on episode 1, as he is the voice of Parallax in Green Lantern. It started in a ton of other movies, almost always a bad guy or unlikable. He's in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and of course, is the voice of Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants. Talk about a line at the convention center, Andrew.
Yep, 100%. That dude's line goes forever. He's got everything. It's genuinely crazy.
Ted Levine. We talked about him way back on Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. Maybe got a Mark Strong award from you. I'm kind of remembering that you really liked that performance. But who knows? There's no way to check. There's no way to know. There's no way to tell.
Yeah. these episodes are out and then they're gone, right?
Probably most known for playing Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lamb. So again, a lot of range here.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Levine he's been in Heat, a movie that I am quite a fan of that I'm actually. Have we done Evolution on this show?
We haven't yet. It's on the list.
He is in that, and I think that's probably the first thing that I genuinely associate him with, just because I remember seeing that as a kid before I saw Silence of the Lambs. And he's all over.
You saw Evolution as a kid before Silence of the Lambs, huh?
Turns out, yeah.
That was weird. That's weird. Okay.
That's weird. It's a little weird thing. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? And then Clancy Brown, like I said, he's Clancy Brown, man. I remember him even from like Buckaroo Banzai. He's the voice of Lex Luthor. He was the Kurgan in Highlander. I mean, he's been in everything, but we know nothing will ever surpass SpongeBob SquarePants.
Money.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna buy that DVD set, Kristen. It's gonna be your fault. But
it's really good. And then I was at Walmart the other day, and I saw the DVDs that we're talking about is the first 100 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. They've also released the next 100 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, there's a change in quality. I'm not sure the second set I'm gonna invest in, but I definitely picked up that first set to throw into my Plex and recreate my childhood. I have Rocko's Modern Life on there already. Daria I just added recently, so I can make some pretty sick playlists now.
I went as Jane from Daria for Halloween once.
Wait, what? You dressed up as Jane from Daria?
Yeah, my girlfriend at the time was Daria. You never saw this?
No, you've got to put it on the Discord, Andrew.
All right. Hold on. Let me find it.
Okay, well, you don't have to do it right this minute here. Okay, are you sending it to me?
My ex even made me like a paper mache thing for the hair. All
right, live reaction here. Photos loading. Bruh. Dude. Oh my god.
It's perfect, right?
This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. You've got the facial expression. That hair is phenomenal.
It is.
Dude. Oh my god, I'm showing this to friend of the show, my wife.
You have to let me know what she says.
All right. Oh, god, this is good podcasting right now.
Yeah, something people can't see. Fantastic.
All right. It's definitely going to show up in the Discord. Check it out there. Lastly, in the cast, last one I want to cover is Will Wheaton as Bennett Hoenicker, his son, who Robin Williams' character is flunking, and they're trying to intimidate him to making him, to passing him, and then they find out about Flubber, and on and on and on. But yep. He's a little brat. He feels like he just deserves to pass because he has a rich daddy.
They literally say it. Like, there's not even like, okay, there's not even like an illusion. To it. They literally are like, he's supposed to get A's because I said so. And I give them money. So where's his A's? And he's thrown off the basketball team, which is the big, makes for a big scene, climactic scene in the movie. But yeah, Will Wheaton plays the jerk extremely well. I know he's kind of like this nerd royalty at this point. And rightfully so. Seems like a great dude. Every indication I've heard from him makes it sound like he's a fantastic dude. Is he as fantastic as Matthew Lillard? Maybe not. But yeah, in here though, he gets his just desserts, and you are quite happy to see them.
Andrew, breaking news: friend of the show, my wife has responded. I just sent her the picture, no caption, and she said, "Is he Jane?" There's like dots in between those words. And she said, "Wow." And then she said, "He's Edna Mode."
Except I'm about 5 feet too tall for Edna Mode.
The only difference. Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait for everyone listening to see this picture. Andrew, let's talk about the scenes of this film. Of course, talking about the best scenes and our personal favorite. In your opinion, when is this movie flying on all cylinders? Does that work? There's a flying car in this movie. When's it flying on all cylinders?
When's it flubbering on all cylinders?
What is the best scene in Flubber?
It is the finale.
Oh boy. Okay.
It is, at this point, we've kind of all the pieces are on the table. Our big villain has basically told Robin Williams that he's taking Flubber, and basically like, come to my house and we're going to discuss this further. They fly the car to the house and we get our big kind of standoff between our big villain and his henchman. But this is after Brainerd and Sarah have kind of reconciled. And so they go to his house off the idea that they're going to accept his offer because he's already stolen Flubber. And that's where they find out that Christopher McDonald's character is allied with him. But then they unleash Flubber, basically, and use that to basically kickstart this fight between Brainerd and Sarah and all of these bad guys. This just leads way to some classic Robin Williams hijinks that you would expect from him, that kind of manic energy. He's kind of flying around this room using the Flubber stuff. Sarah gets a chance to get in on this as well. And eventually everybody, which is Smith and Wesson, you see what they did there?
I did not catch it until you said it out loud just now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
Oh, wow. I figured that was pretty obvious. But anyway, so Smith and Wesson, who have already been beat up by Flubber adjacent stuff several times throughout this movie, you almost feel bad for them. And then they do something mean and you're like, no, you're a jerk. But they both get taken out. Will Wheaton gets flipped over a couch, which is very satisfying. And then ultimately they send our big bad guy, Chester Hoenicker, flying through a window, which that's movie speak for he ain't coming back. Once you go through a window, it's over. It's done. And it's just really fun. It's weird to say that about a bunch of people getting beat up really bad by a green flying rubber, but it is. You get to see Robin Williams do the things that you kind of expect Robin Williams to do. Marcia Gay Harden gets in on that as well. And all of the villains are doing their parts exactly right. I mean, Clancy Brown and Ted Levine are both like amazing character actors, but they also have really good comedic timing. They're really funny in some of the stuff that they're in. They do often get cast as kind of just like straight-faced, serious, hard-lined type characters, but there's a lot of comedy that these guys are capable of. You just watch Clancy Brown in any episode of SpongeBob as Mr. Krabs, and you know that there's some comedy lying in those giant bones of his. But they both do a great job, and it's just a blast. It's everything that you would expect that this finale would kind of be, featuring all of these people, and they nail it. 10 out of 10.
It is wild hijinks, and anytime the movie starts getting slapsticky, it just slips into this whole other mode, this whole Looney Tunes. I've referenced Home Alone a few times, the wacky cartoon sound effects. Like, the movie is never like serious. It's never like trying to elevate to fine art or anything, but something about getting into this mode, this total gear shift that is, these are the moments where I'm like, wow, they just don't make them like this anymore. I mean, this movie's pre 9/11 as hell, Andrew. It's just so goofy and innocent that in a way that they don't make them like this anymore, for better or worse. I agree. We get a lot of classic Robin Williams here. In particular, I like that, he's got Flubber on his shoes, so he keeps bouncing off the walls, and at one point almost gets impaled by some taxidermy, to which he says, "Oh dear," and it's a deer. It's a deer. It's pretty good. I agree. Yeah. I like that Marcia Gay Harden gets to get in on the action too. She gets to Flubberize her hand and like punch the crap out of Mr. Hoenicker. No, she punches old Shooter McGavin there.
Yep.
Wilson Croft, because he's been a slime ball the whole movie. And man, the demise of Wilson Croft, Andrew, at the end of the scene. The Flubber, it's bouncing all over the place, and then it shoots right into his mouth. And then Christopher McDonald just puts in an Academy Award performance as he writhes in pain because the flubber's working its way through his body, presumably. He's making all kinds of noises and shaking and moving his hips and ends up in this kind of crouching position. And then the flubber flies out of his pants, Andrew. It just blasts blasts a hole through his pants. Well, my notes say in all caps, it came out of his ass.
Which is exactly what happened.
I kind of couldn't believe they did. It was obvious what was going to happen from the moment it went into his mouth, but they just show it. And then he falls to the ground, and Robin Williams, Marcia Gay Harden, they just look and go, oh. And he puts his arm around her, and they turn around and they walk away. And we never see him there on the ground. A friend of the show, my wife, happened to be here at the end of the movie. I was watching it, and she's like, that's the only reaction you can have. Like, what do you say to that? Did he die? Did his insides come out after the flubber? Or is he just very uncomfortable, going to have to use a donut for a while when he sits down? We don't know. The movie leaves us to ponder the aftermath of flubber going through your body.
As I put it to you, Chris, there's two options here. One is Flubber digested himself through this man's system and shot out of his butt. The second is he destroyed this man's insides and then ejected from his butt. There is no good answer here, but in the second one, it is much more lethal and much more dangerous. We do not find out what happens to this man. His fate is left a mystery. But I don't think Flubber knows the intricacies of the human anatomy. I would be hard-pressed to think that man comes out of this alive.
This is actually the origin story for Carnage in this universe. The Flubber that comes out is now Carnage.
Shut up. I hate you.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Andrew, I mean, it's a good pick. I mean, it's just so it's wacky. I guess it's what you signed up for when you walked into Flubber starring Robin Williams. I'm gonna highlight a different scene, but before I get to my scene, I do want to. It's kind of right before, I guess, what you're saying is your favorite scene. But if I can really zoom in to like my favorite 30 seconds of the movie, it's got to be whenever Professor Brainerd arrives at their house. He's like turning himself in essentially, and he's going to show them how Flubber works, and they're patting him down. And I believe it's Smith who's doing this. He finds a pistol in his pocket, and he pulls out, and he's like, "What's this?" And Robin Williams says, "Oh, it's a water pistol." And he starts squirting Robin Williams in the face. He's spraying him with a water pistol. He's like, "I need it to cool down the machine." And then Mr. Honecker says, "Give it to him." And he just keeps squirting him in the face. He's giving it to him. He's like, "No, the gun." And he keeps squirting him in the face. He's like, "No, put it in his hand." And then he starts squirting water into his hand. He's like, "No, give him the water pistol." And then he finally realizes what he's telling him, and he hands over the water pistol. Probably not as funny as I'm just like walking through the beats, like explaining it. But this how long is the sequence, Andrew? It's like
it goes for like 30 plus seconds. It's very
they get
long.
So much mileage out of this,
and Ted Levine could not wait to just keep shooting Robin Williams in the face with a squirt gun. Like that
it was the single funniest joke in the movie. It absolutely killed me. It was. I was like, I can't believe how far they are going with this little gag. It was hilarious. But as far as the whole scene, I'm going to highlight the invention of Flubber, the first appearance of Flubber, because it's just Robin Williams in the basement. Of course, we get the character of Flubber. We have Weibo flying around, but on set, it's just Robin Williams. And the first time that he pulls out the Flubber, I mean, I like the creation of it where he blows up his basement and he's, got all the ash on his face and stuff. But the first time he's interacting with the Flubber, which, by the way, looks pretty good. I was totally anticipating some really janky CG in this movie.
Yep.
I think it might look dated at times, but all the special effects in this movie hold up. Like, no joke. But yeah, like him just bouncing it and then, catching it, or he gets it on his foot and his foot starts bouncing. We see that a little bit later in the movie. But anytime he's clearly just acting against himself, it's just peak Robin Williams physical comedy, and I can't get enough of it. I absolutely love it. I mean, this kind of stuff is what's earning him the Mark Strong Award. The fact that you can just put him in front of the camera and say, all right, Robin, go, and they can make something out of it, make a whole scene out of it, is fantastic. We have one of the more famous shots in the movie where he stretches the flubber out thin and then puts his face through it, which is a huge special effects shot. They use it in all the trailers. That happens here. It's good stuff, and this is the scene where I realized he doesn't just invent flying rubber, just the material. He creates life, Andrew. Like, that's pretty clear. Like, this flubber is sentient, right? It's mimicking him, and it kind of squeak talks, and it has a mind of its own. It mocks a woman's buttocks a little bit later in the film. He created life. I don't understand how he then turns it into like an aerosol spray. He can spray on his shoes. Like, is that Flubber Mist still alive? We don't really dive into those questions, but Flubber is alive in this movie. And the creation of Flubber, the Frankenstein moment, if you will, is my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a really good sequence. You said you get a little bit of that manic energy from Robin Williams here as well. But yeah, they kind of brush over that he basically creates life. And instead they just make it sound like he invented flying cars. They really do. But it's a really fun sequence. This is where we find out that he's missed his wedding for the third time. And we find out that maybe his robot assistant has more to do with that than we realize. This is a weird movie, folks. Just so weird. It is a really fun scene, though. I agree. It's you get all that energy you're expecting. Like you said, I was actually really surprised. I think they make some choices with how Flubber looks that make it work pretty well in the grand scheme of things, and that helps it age a little bit better. There's definitely ways you could have chose to play this that would have made it stand out a little bit more, but I think by making it kind of translucent, you're able to kind of use that to your advantage, and I think that helps a lot. So, yeah, fun stuff.
I mean, his whole house, like the very, very beginning of this movie, we're starting with this, like a camera kind of pans through his house and his front yard, which has all this like DIY science stuff that he's rigged. It's such a 90s trope. Just all the homemade inventions and stuff. And then a Rube Goldberg breakfast machine. How many times have we seen this in the movies? I remember the Flintstones does it, or it has a Rube Goldberg like an alarm clock in the Flintstones. But like, I always think of
Back to the Future,
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Back to the Future. Here in Flubber, what is with 90s and 80s and Rube Goldberg breakfast machines? They are so common. But I gotta say, as a kid, I was always like, dude, I would love to have something like that, or love to build something like that. So maybe that's why they keep doing it, just because, does something to your imagination. But
I think for me, it was really just indicative of how lazy I was, because I thought it would be awesome to not have to do any of that work myself. To just have like a full breakfast ready and not have to do anything.
Does Casper do it? I feel like Casper has one too.
Casper, no. Well, I don't know if it is and it isn't, because like there's a whole thing where like his dad sits in the chair and it like shaves him and brushes his teeth and all that stuff. I don't know if breakfast was part of that or not. Maybe part of it, but not all of it. Casper just makes breakfast at one point in that movie. I was talking to Liz about this movie last night, and she was just like, I get that movie confused with Casper. And I was like,
Flubber?
Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm willing to follow you on this journey. What are you talking about? And she was like, well, there's like, she's like, somebody dies in Flubber. I was like, no, somebody dies in Casper. Many people die in Casper, technically. There was some piece of it that she was like confusing between the two. And I think she was remembering Casper more than Flubber. But I think she was
translucent being.
I think she was just crossing Bill Pullman and Casper with Robin Williams from Flubber because they dress kind of the same. I think she was just like, those two characters were just like merging in her head into one person. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
There is.
Then again, you think of that. Was Robin Williams going to be in Casper?
There is an egg cracking machine in Casper. When Casper is making the breakfast, I'm looking at a gif of it right now. An egg slides in, the machine cracks it, it pulls the egg apart, the yolk drops down to the pan. So we got a breakfast machine.
We do.
Such a specific trope. Oh, man.
Oh, God. What a time to be alive.
Also, him and his fiance are both they just go to work that day on their wedding day. They're getting married at 6:30.
Yeah, like
during the week, I guess. They work a whole, like, he goes to visit her on his lunch.
And he
break,
forgets.
And then she's like, yeah, don't forget, wedding later. And then he's all rushing back to college, and he walks into the wrong college classroom.
Yep.
He walks into they're clearly doing art class because there's two nude models at the front of the class and everyone is drawing them. And one of my notes is like, how common is it to draw naked people? It is another trope we see in movies and TV shows all the time. The art class, someone walks in, they're naked and you draw them. Like, I know it's a real thing, but like movies lead me to believe that this is like art 101. You're going to see some naked people and draw them.
Nah, it's not that common. No, but yeah, movies and even TV shows love to do that for just like comedic effect. But like, yeah, I people are like, yes, it definitely does happen, but it's a much, much higher level. Like, because the reality of it is that they don't want creeps, basically. So if you're going to do it, you know, they want to make sure that you're actually a serious artist. And yeah, they don't want any nonsense. So, yeah, but yeah, movies would definitely have you think that like half of all art classes is just a naked person standing in front of you.
I mean, naked people are funny. You can't.
They are,
no
just
denying
objectively.
It's inherently funny, yeah. Also in that scene, my note says wrong ampersand on chalkboard. Andrew, let me see if you're as passionate about this as I am. The ampersand. Okay, it's just a symbol that means and.
Uh-huh.
Right? You with me so far?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to write it. Like there's the way like a typewriter or even a keyboard would do it, where it's like this almost figure 8 looking thing, but it's got a straight line in there. You know what I'm talking about. No one ever like writes that though. Whenever someone writes an ampersand, in my opinion, the correct way to do an ampersand is a backwards 3. And then you either put a line through it or a dot above and dot below. I don't care if you do a line or dots. That doesn't bother me. But it needs to be a backwards 3. It can't just be the number 3. And that's what we have on the chalkboard here. We have the number 3 with a dot above and dot below, and that represents an ampersand. I say that is wrong. And I feel pretty strongly about this.
Chris, I'm really glad you brought this up. Because this is something that I've thought about. Never!
I should have asked you to draw an ampersand before I said all that, because now you're probably in your head about it. Like, do you know how you would do do you ever draw an ampersand? Do you ever use it?
No. If I do, I do that dumb little like, it's a plus sign where I don't take the pen off the paper.
Oh, and it's like connected, like the bottom and the left.
The bottom or the top or whatever. Like I start at the bottom. Like I start at the bottom, go up and swing around, but it's like fluid, so it's almost circular. Because you know what I mean at that point.
Well, look, this is a PSA. Your ampersand needs to be a backwards 3.
I don't give a shit.
That's it. That's it.
Sorry.
Andrew, I mean, this isn't a terribly long movie. I don't want to say we've almost talked about all of it, but like the beginning, the setup, the creation of Flubber, the final, like these are the big parts of the movie. We don't have too much more I think we need to dive into. But another famous scene in this movie is a Flubber dance sequence. Like Flubber multiplies to a bunch of little characters. They salsa dance with each other. There's an audience of Flubbers watching the Flubber. It's very intricate, very involved. I did not remember the Flubber being alive, but I remember this scene. So I thought, was it a dream sequence? Does he hit his head and this happened? I couldn't quite remember, but no, it's just Flubber's alive and it wanted to dance one night. So we get a big dance sequence. I gotta imagine this is where a good chunk of the budget went, because 1997 CG dance sequence could not have been easy, but they really show off what they can do here. Like I said, it's the Flubber's translucent. You can always kind of see through it, and it kind of magnifies what's on the other side. There's some water effects here. It's a weird scene, Andrew, but technically speaking, totally holds up. I think it looks like my note literally says the Flubber dance sequence looks great. It looks really good.
It does. It's still one of the weirdest things I've ever seen because the Flubber because not just has he invented life, he has seemingly invented a form of life that can infinitely split itself. This thing isn't just alive. It can manipulate itself to be any size that it wants by the nature of the fact that during this whole sequence, there are like thousands of Flubbers.
This could be a life form as powerful as the xenomorphs, if you think about it.
This could be more powerful than the xenomorphs, as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is deadly. This is
Alien versus Flubber? When's that movie coming out?
Flubber wins. There's no question here. This is the most dangerous life form ever conceived, Chris. And he's just leaving it in his basement. Like, this is horrifying. Anyway, even the robots get in on it. Like, one of the robots suddenly has like a bunch of fruit on it and like is doing like a weird like maraca dance. Like, it's such a weird sequence of events. And I'm like, but a lot of planning had to go into this. Like, it's this meticulously crafted sequence and it's just wild.
Something that kind of bothered me watching this movie, and I gotta lie, and I'm watching the movie wrong, but like he invents this incredible thing. He almost immediately comes up with like practical applications for it, whether it makes you jump really high or it can make a car fly. Like, he comes up with cool stuff for it, but like he's not trying to capitalize on it. He's not trying to sell it. He's not taking it anywhere. He's not trying to make money off of it. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, make money. Like, that sounds like, I guess, fatalistically capitalist of me, but why did you invent this if it's not to either benefit mankind or make a company or build something with it? But eventually he does. Pretty late into this movie, he goes to, I don't know, what is it, Ford headquarters? He goes to just a big office building that says Ford, and he flies his car out through a window. That's like his big sales pitch. You know, hey, I can make flying cars for you. And he's got his fiance in the passenger seat, and she holds up a sign, a for sale sign. It says for sale, and then it has an email address written on it, which, I mean, definitely we had emails in 1997, but I feel like it's still before the era where like every single person on Earth had an email. I don't know. I thought it was interesting to see an email in 97.
Fun fact.
Yes?
The secretary in that sequence is Nancy Olson, who plays the role of Betsy Carlisle in the original Absent Minded Professor.
Hey, Andrew? That is a fun fact.
I thought so.
You want to hear another fun fact, Andrew? I emailed that email address. The email address is P. Brainerd, which I realize might be a pun for P. Brain. It's P. Brainerd. Let me get it right here. I wrote it down. P.
Yes.
Brainerd at medfield.edu. Before we hit record, I sent them an email. I kept it concise. I said, "Thank you for Flubber. You have changed our world for the better." I got a response, Andrew.
No way.
I got an email back. It says, "Address not found. Your message wasn't delivered to pbrainerd.medfield.edu. Pbrainerd at medfield.edu because the domain medfield.edu couldn't be found." So there you
go. Really nice they took the time to respond and tell you that.
It was kind of them, right? They didn't just leave me hanging here. I didn't leave you guys hanging. I told you exactly what happened there. So there you go. Part of me, there was like 0.01% of me hoping like someone hopped onto this and they respond to anybody that reaches out with something funny, but it didn't happen. Maybe I should be the change I want to see in the world, though.
Maybe.
Is that what is that, like $10 a month probably to have like a domain
something
registered?
Like
yeah. Is that worth the joke? We'll see. What a weird movie. That's my next note after the email address is what a weird movie. I don't even know what scene I wrote that about. Probably when
all of it.
Weebo gets killed. And there's it's very dramatic. For one, Weebo, in Weebo's mind, Dr. Sarah is the other woman. She's jealous
Right.
of her. Or maybe it's the other way around. In Dr. Sarah's mind, Weibo is the other woman because Robin Williams chose Sarah. But either way, she's pretty compassionate to another woman that's in love with her man. And whenever she does punch Shooter McGavin later in the movie, she says, "This is for Weibo." Kind of avenges her and what they did to her. I thought it was nice that the two women in this movie would come together like that.
It is. And it's weird that we're saying the two women in this movie when one of them looks like a flying toaster. But
and you know what, Andrew? I don't think this movie passes the Bechdel test because they only talk about
those two
Robin
only
Williams.
speak about Robin Williams. No, it was interesting. And those are two of the. That was actually the last sequences I really wanted to highlight. Is this? There's a sequence where Weebu has been like slowly sabotaging his relationship with Dr. Sarah. And to clarify, Nancy Olsen from the original Spider Professor, she plays Betsy Carlisle. That is the Dr. Sarah Reynolds character of that movie. So she's that important of a character from the original film. The lead of that film was dead by the time this was made, so he was not available. But this sequence was really interesting, and I liked it because this whole time Weebu has felt relatively justified in what she's doing, by and large. She's kind of embarrassed by it. Like, she creates this visual for herself, and then, like, when Robin Williams almost sees it, like, she's embarrassed and she goes and hides it real quick. And then later on, this is kind of what I'm talking about with, like, the hard switches that Robin Williams makes. He has this whole speech that he gives Weebu about Sarah, and he says, you know, he's like, I'm not absent-minded because I'm lazy or I'm inconsiderate. He's absent-minded because he's so in love with Dr. Sarah. And folks, I just want to say, in real life, that's not a healthy thing. That's you can't say something like that. It will never land like it does in this movie for you in real life, ever. I know I'm watching it wrong, but that's the moment that Weebu kind of realizes that this is not about her anymore, or that, I forget what the exact line is, but something along the lines of, sometimes you have to do the right thing, even if that's basically letting them go to somebody else. And so at that point, she secretly recorded him saying that, takes it herself to Dr. Sarah. And I don't know why I'm calling her Dr. Sarah all of a sudden. It's very weird.
You better respect on the name.
That's true. Weird. Yes, she did the work. She's got all that debt. I better respect it. And Weebu goes to her and kind of shows her this clip. And there's this weird and even the scene that they share is a little strange, because she shows Dr. Sarah this message, and it's like Dr. Sarah knows that Weebu has been the thing in the way. There's like this weird kind of like unspoken thing where, like, Dr. Sarah knows that Weebu coming and showing her this is like a weird I'm getting out of the way type thing. Like I'm stepping aside because you're what he really wants. And like Dr. Sarah kisses Weebu like briefly. Like, I was just like, what's happening here? What is going on? And then Dr. Sarah goes over to, you know, Brainerd's house, and they kind of reconcile. And this is all just a really well-crafted sequence. Like I said, don't do this in real life, folks. If you tell your robot assistant that you're absent-minded because you're in love with somebody so hard, no one's going to buy it. It will not pass any sniff test. But it's even less so because you have a robot assistant. And, like, you should be able to remember things if you have a robot assistant. But anyway, this is when they reconcile. This is when they kind of are like, the Flubber can save the college. The Flubber can get us money. And then that's what leads to the break-in that ultimately leads to Wesson pummeling Weebu with a baseball bat. And yeah, you get a very, like, saddened Robin Williams finding Weebu in a state of disrepair, and he's broken up about it. And Dr. Sarah also is kind of broken up about it because
and they play it totally straight.
They play it straight, 100%, and it works, generally speaking. Like, the emotions they're showing feel very real. And by the end of it, I was just like, ugh, am I sad? No, I don't. I don't consent. But it somehow all lands and it all works. And it's a testament to Robin Williams' empathy that he could show in his performances. A lot of credit to Marcia as well. She's providing that same level of emotional support, the same way that he is for this. And it just somehow works. Like any other, and that's what you talk about the Mark Strong. Like no one else could make this work like Robin Williams does. Like absolutely no one. And you know, I think about movies where robots pass away and it's a sad thing, and it's never quite like it is here. But it is a pretty good sequence of events. And then obviously the twist at the end there is that Weebu created a backup of herself that fixed some of the, shall we say, obsession problems, and introduced a few more of Robin Williams' traits to create what she is calling her daughter called Weebet. We're just going to breeze right past.
Such a weird
Weebu,
movie.
I was like, we're just going to breeze right past that Weebu in that moment basically admitted that she created a new version of herself designed to be the child of herself and Professor Brainerd. Like, we're just moving past that, folks. We're not going to acknowledge it.
And then she's like the child of the professor and Dr. Sarah.
Yeah, like basically.
Like their adopted child.
It is, folks, this is a weird movie.
It's so weird. Andrew, I was going through, doing our research here, going through Robin Williams' filmography, and another movie that was produced by John Hughes Company and starring Robin Williams is Jack. Remember that movie? Or like he ages rapidly, so he's like a kid, but he's Robin Williams. Do you know who directed that movie, Andrew?
Who?
Just guess.
Robert Zemeckis.
Francis Ford Coppola.
No kidding.
Directed Jack.
I wonder what financial endeavor he was recovering from that he needed the money.
Man, that dude has a
folks,
wild
I say this as nicely as I can. If you look through Francis Ford Coppola's filmography, you can absolutely pick out the things where he needed money. And I say that as nicely as I can. Because he would do like some high profile passion project and it would bomb. And then he'd go off and do a bunch of commercial stuff and it'd be like, oh, here's him making all his money back. And yeah, there you can.
I would love if he just approached every movie with the same
ridiculous nature that he does. Yeah.
The same energy put into like Apocalypse Now,
or
where he's Godfather. Like, yeah, we had an 8-hour cut of Jack, and I just, it spent 3 months in a hotel room trying to cut it down to 2 hours, and we didn't know how the film was going to end, so we shot it 10 different ways, and this character was added late to production. And I would love to see the documentary, the Heart of Darkness version of the documentary on the making of Jack.
Yeah, there's definitely, You Don't Know Jack is the name of that documentary.
Perfect. Nailed it. Make it happen. Where is it?
Oh man, that might be my single greatest comedic achievement.
And you did it on microphone, Andrew. It's going to be here forever.
That's fantastic. That is also, I gotta say, I noticed this watching Flubber, because there's a sequence where like he's laying down on the ground and his hands come into the shot, and he's so hairy. He's so hairy. My God, that was the only thing I was thinking in that moment. There was so much hair on his hands. I was like, bro, like you're the Wolfman without even needing prosthetics. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, those arms be hairy. That's for sure. R.I.P. Robin Williams. Andrew, we're almost through Disney month. We have 1 week left. The last week of Disney month is all about Disney Star Wars. They've made 5 feature films now and tons of shows on Disney Plus. The Disney Star Wars content starting to rival all other Disney content at this point in a very short amount of time. But the movie we'll be covering is The Rise of Skywalker. the end of the Disney Star Wars trilogy. It is pretty objectively the lowest received, you could say, poorest received, so we will be diving into it. But I'll be honest, there's probably no way to just talk about that movie. I think we're going to be talking about a lot of Disney Star Wars next week. I think it's going to be a long episode. But
I would assume
that's a week away. There's a lot to dive into there. For now, it's time for the question of the week. And if you want to leave a question for our podcast, you can. Just hop into our Discord if you aren't there already. There's a link in the show notes. You can go to the question of the week channel, just like Reyes683 did. And here's what they say. Does the Rotten Tomatoes situation change the criteria of the show? Now, for context, they posted this question a couple months ago now. After this news story broke, what was it in Variety, Hollywood Reporter?
I think so, yeah.
One of those publications did a big write-up about Rotten Tomatoes, specifically about studios manipulating the Rotten Tomatoes score. Now, they had a few specific examples, and then they talked more broadly about it. Maybe, Andrew, I don't know if you're pulling it up, you can remember the exact movie they highlighted, but essentially, it's what a lot of people kind of feared might be happening on a larger scale. It's that production company or studios can pay off, at the very least, a handful of reviewers. Payoff sounds so much more extreme. They can give them a bonus for speaking positively about their film, or they can just simply have them on the payroll. So, of course, they're going to say a positive review about that movie, manipulating the score. And what this does is whenever it's a small release or a movie that's maybe doing festivals and there's a limited number of qualified Rotten Tomatoes reviews, if you have a few that are, in your pocket, you're going to come out with an 80, 90% score. And that's really important early in a movie's life like that for word of mouth and to try to get a lot of buzz. So even if that score kind of comes down as more reviews come in, you had that, you kind of manufacture that early buzz for the movie. That's kind of a general idea of what this article is about. Is that about it, Andrew?
Yeah. The general gist of it was that they highlight a specific story in which a PR firm hired people to write positive reviews for a film and altered the score. Now, the article is interesting because the movie that it largely leads with is an adaptation of Ophelia, which was a feminist retelling of Hamlet starring Daisy Ridley. The early screenings of that amounted to 13 total reviews. Now, here's why I was kind of skeptical of the article. When your movie has 13 reviews, 3 or 4 reviews actually impacts that score a lot. And that's what essentially happened. This PR company, Bunker 15, apparently paid critics to write positive reviews. Got that score that was at like 47% up to over 60%. The movie ended up getting a distribution deal. That movie is actually no longer on Rotten Tomatoes. You can't find it there. Now, that story, I think, is not a great example of what people want to believe Rotten Tomatoes is doing. Now, what people want to believe is happening is that droves of critics are being paid off to swing creative scores one way or another. But largely speaking, as we've established on this show several times, Rotten Tomatoes scores, especially for modern movies, are typically hundreds of reviews. So when you pay off 4 people to write a positive review for your big studio blockbuster, we're talking single percentage points. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a problem here. Now, and I also feel like we've been pretty good about pointing out, like even last week on Black Cauldron, that this is 37 reviews. They're historical reviews, and they're the only ones that they can find. And we'll be very clear that these are older reviews. The sample size is much smaller. If it came out today, it would have a lot more visibility, and the score might be very different. So the Ophelia story they tell in that article, I don't think is a great example. I'm trying to find the best way to phrase this. I don't think it says what people think it says, is I think how I would put that. People want to believe that that story means that studios are out there paying off critics by the hundreds to swing the reviews of their movies. I would question that for a variety of reasons. Namely, almost every Marvel movie recently has gotten really low critic scores. And if it were as simple as just paying off everybody to get positive scores all the times, why wouldn't that be happening? Like, it's that kind of thing of like, if buying and selling critics' reviews to get better Rotten Tomato scores were so common and so easy, why aren't they doing it?
Yeah, every Hollywood movie has giant corporations behind it that are invested in the movie's success. They can all afford to pay for reviews if that was the system.
Especially if you only target like lower people on the totem pole. Like, you go after the bottom 100 critics that would all be willing to be bought off with a couple $100, and that's 100 people that are now saying your movie's positive. That could swing it. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't happen, and I'm not going to say that it's not a problem, but it does, I will admit, contribute to something that is become something where like Rotten Tomatoes now is a barometer. You know, people will say a bad Rotten Tomatoes score will hurt your movie because people look to it. They're saying, hey, you know, like the Marvels right now, I think is sitting in the low 60s. It was rotten, but it did bump itself back up to the low 60s. And people are looking at it now and being like, oh, well, you know, Rotten Tomatoes is this. And people will be like, well, and there's other people on the other side. They're like, well, you're an idiot if you look at Rotten Tomatoes. Like, they just are like, well, why don't you go see something for yourself? And my response to that is there's too much. That's my response to people who would be like, why would you use Rotten Tomatoes? And I would say, plainly, there's too much content. I don't have the time to just watch everything. Hell, before there was tons of content, I didn't have time to watch everything. I just didn't. And is there a better way to do it? I don't know. Like, I really don't. Like, but even if you look at things like the cinema score or whatever, there's still aggregates of people's opinions. Everything is an aggregate of what other people think at some point. And it's a tough thing to quantify. Now, the implication of this article, it was Vulture, by the way, that published the article. It was, you know, and even something else that's happened now, like filmmakers are basically saying, I don't care about critics. Like Quentin Tarantino, he's like, I don't read critics' work. And it's happened a lot where like people think it's also a big part of the switch of movies to being seen less as films and more as content, because everything just kind of gets assigned its number or gets assigned its classification, and then it just goes into a bin, basically. And that's not to say there's not flaws with the system. There's always been flaws with that system. Rotten Tomatoes is a aggregate built on the idea of a review being good or bad. There's no room for how good. There's no room for how bad. There's no room for how enthusiastic. There's no room for any of that. So, like, something like Wall-E has a 96%. But something like Free Guy sits in the 80s. Is Free Guy, you know, it's the difference between two. You could have two movies sitting at 95% and be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You could have like Goodfellas at 95%, and you could have, say, you know, I can't even think of something off the top of my head now. A movie that's good but not memorable. Something like Free Guy. Free Guy's a great example, I think. It's good, but like, is it Goodfellas? No, it's not. But the scores are essentially similar. And people will be like, well, how does that make sense? And it's like, because the people that reviewed Goodfellas and liked it thought it was an instant classic, whereas the people who watched Free Guy and liked it were like, yeah, it's good.
It's an entertaining movie in theaters.
It's entertaining. So it's a positive review. But so there's no compensating for that. There never has been a way to do that. Rotten Tomatoes is built, while there's an aggregate score, it's still built off of a binary good or bad, yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down. And when you reduce something to that, it's going to be a flawed system. Just unequivocally. It always will be. It's just how it is.
Yeah. Well put, Andrew. In short, yeah, I don't think the article, when it unveils, is going to change anything about like our show. For one, we don't like live or die by the Rotten Tomatoes score. Like we covered Cars a couple weeks ago. It's positive. There's other ways to be poorly received. That's just one kind of pillar that we look at. I don't think there's evidence that there's been dramatic tampering across the board, even if there's proof of some isolated incidents and there's kind of a model for it. What I found most interesting about that article was it sort of explained how we got to a point where this could happen, where a PR company could pay off low-level, I hate to even say low-level, basically like vloggers and stuff to get that score bumped. And it comes from a place of good intentions. It comes from a place where Rotten Tomatoes looked at, or was maybe forced to look at, sort of the diversity of the critics that they deemed professional critics and counted for a Rotten Tomatoes score, and found that it was overwhelmingly, like over 90% maybe, older straight white men. I mean, that's from the publications they looked at, that's the people that were in charge of writing movie reviews. And obviously you create something that is, with a lack of diversity, it's essentially the Rotten Tomato score is from the point of view of one very specific demographic, which is not really indicative of what they're trying to do. Their solution to that was to broaden the scale of how you qualify to submit your score to Rotten Tomatoes. It went from like, the numbers are in the article, like thousands to tens of thousands. Like it dramatically went up. And they did things like include bloggers, vloggers, YouTubers, not just people that are working in an editorial job at a newspaper or publication. So it is a more diverse group now, which is good. But also the, I guess, quality bar to get in is pretty low. You can be a YouTuber with a few thousand subscribers and you can qualify to have your opinion count on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's just, this is the effect of that.
Well, and I think another piece of that is, okay, cool. All those new people are all these different groups. Your main core chunk is still that same group. So how much of a swing are you actually seeing? How much of an impact is it actually having? So like you've diluted the pool in some ways. Some people would say that's what they've done. For a result that's not really going to be that tangible. But I think accounting for that is important. I mean, the reason 95% of the internet hates Brie Larson is because she said she was far less interested in the reviews of older straight white dudes. And they all took that as a personal offense. They're like, why can't I criticize what she does? Blah, 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 blah. Which means they ignored all the context. They ignored all the other aspects of the conversation.
It's a very reasonable statement that was made.
Right. It's a completely innocuous statement that when you're making content aimed at other demographics, the opinions of that demographic are what's going to mean more to you than the opinions of people outside that demographic. But, there's a lot of people on the internet who can't stand something never being about them. It's the same as like, there are Ghostbuster fans who insist Paul Feig made fun of Ghostbuster fans, or that Rian Johnson made fun of Star Wars fans. These guys are insistent that these guys made fun of them, when in reality, they were calling out very specific behaviors by a very specific group. And if you weren't doing those things, you weren't part of who they were talking about. It's that idea of like, you'll say, the people that do this are kind of driving me crazy. And somebody will be like, oh, well, I've never done that. And it's like, cool, then I'm not friggin' talking about you. Like, it's this like weird thing. But like with Brie Larson especially, all she said was, if I make a movie aimed at a certain demographic, I'm more interested in the opinions of that demographic. That is the literal meaning of what she said. And the internet decided that meant Brie Larson hated men. And even now, with the Marvels coming out, every comment section is just flooded with, can't wait for this to fail because Brie Larson hates men. And it's just like, Jesus Christ. No, he has nothing to do with this, but man, it is awful. But it's
let's bring your blood pressure down a little bit and bring us back on the course a little bit. Rotten Tomatoes. I just want to say that I find Rotten Tomatoes helpful as a quick guide for a movie's reception. If it comes out and it's 20%, maybe I can wait on it. Or, oh yeah, I had a bad feeling about it. That's not going to convince me. Or I was on the fence about it, but it has a 90%. Yeah, I'm more interested. Like, it as a general guide, I think it is very useful and a good shorthand. That being said, I used to obsessively read movie reviews. I used to go to a website called mrque.com, and I just checked. It's still there. I hadn't been here in a long time. It looks very different, but it looks like it functions exactly the same. This was my absolute favorite website. mrque.com. It's the movie review query engine. You can type in any movie, and it brings up all the reviews for it that it can find. And it would even sort them, like Roger Ebert was always like near the top. It kind of sorted them by like the qualifications of reviewers, the most popular reviewers at the top, the big names were, it's easy to find the big reviews for them. And I would do this all the time, like especially when I was in high school, buying a bunch of movies, going through the past decades, trying to catch up on movies. I would I'd pick an actor. I'd read reviews for all of their movies, find out what the best ones are, which ones I should go back and watch. I used to just read movie reviews all the time. And what I did was I found 2, 3, maybe 4 reviewers that I tended to really like. I've talked about Roger Ebert before. Love his reviews because even if I don't agree with him, I get a good idea of what the movie is. Like, oh, he didn't like it, but by the way he's describing it, I think I might be into that. Or vice versa. The things he liked about it, he loves Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. I can read that review and be like, nope, that ain't for me. I have tried to watch the movie. It ain't for me.
I didn't need to read a review to tell you that.
I found a few reviewers that I like, and I would read the reviews. That's obviously, like, that's the best thing to do if you're interested in a critic's opinion or a critical analysis of film, is just read the reviews. And like I said, I hadn't been to this website in a long time. Like, I don't do that anymore because of things like Rotten Tomatoes and just the way social media and everything works. I get these snippets of opinions, and that's kind of taken the place, which isn't good. It's not a great replacement for it, but I can't go all in and say Rotten Tomatoes is the end all be all, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's trash or pointless. Like, it's somewhere in between there. It's a tool, one of many tools you can use to figure out where a movie might stand for you. I mean, it's not a black and white thing. I don't know what to say.
A great example of that is a movie came out many years ago called 10 Cloverfield Lane. I'm not sure if you remember it. John Goodman.
Yes.
I saw that was coming out and didn't really have a huge interest in it. Didn't really care. I wasn't the biggest fan of Cloverfield. And I was kind of like, we're doing like a weird, like, and then I like read all the stuff where it's like, it's in the universe, but it's a different thing. And I was kind of like, it's not really vibing for me. And then it got like a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I was like, what? So I went and watched it, and it was great.
One of John Goodman's best performances of his entire career.
Absolutely. Completely off book, how he normally does things. And he's great. He's terrifying to a certain degree. And you're just like, whoa. Fun fact, 10 Cloverfield Lane, directed by the same guy who directed Prey.
Oh, that is fun.
It is.
Great movie.
As far as I'm concerned, that's 2 hits. But but that's the kind of stuff that I think people don't really consider. They assume that if you're using Rotten Tomatoes, you're not actually like, and that's kind of what my issue. Most of the Rotten Tomatoes arguments really boil down to some version of, oh, well, if you use Rotten Tomatoes, you're lazy. That's really what it boils down to. And I really, really just don't like arguments that boil down to things like that. Like, it's a weird thing because I feel like film gets this a lot more heavily than like other things do. Like, if you see that some item that you were looking to buy for your home is rated like 4.8 out of 5 based off 10,000 reviews, you're going to assume it's pretty good quality. But if a movie gets rated like that by something, you're like, I can't trust that. You got to think deeper about it. You're just lazy if you follow that recommendation. And I don't know. Like you said, there's no great answer. There's no black and white solution because it's not a black and white world, and art is subjective to a degree. And like, but the one thing I will say, maybe this will be my last thoughts on the matter. People still really misread what those percentages actually mean. Like, they really do. Like, people still think that the percentage score is the score of how good it is. And I can see why you'd think that's what it is. Like, you see a movie's a 60%, you think everybody thinks it's a 6 out of 10. But no, if it's a 60%, it means 6 out of 10 critics thought it was good. If it's a 50%, that means the critics were split completely. Half liked it, half didn't. And so it's always wild to me when I'll see somebody be like, this movie's got a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. Clearly that means they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, no, it means that half the critics agreed with you if you liked it. So, yeah, it's literally what it means. So,
yeah, it's okay to like something that other people don't like. It's okay for other people to don't like something that you like. It's totally fine. And
what?
We've been making this joke throughout the episode that like we don't have time to go off on this tangent. We really don't have and this is not a bit. We don't have time to go off on this tangent, which is I think a big part of this problem is that social media has incentivized everyone to have a take. Everyone has to have a take, a definitive take on everything from movies to video games to whatever else. And you've got to fit that hot take into 140 characters or into a meme or into something that's bite size. This is garbage, or this is a masterpiece, or this is mid objectively. And that destroys discussion and leads to nothing but vitriol. And it is the reason I have retracted from so much of social media. Again, that's a huge tangent I don't need to go on, but I think it's intrinsically tied to the kind of issue we're discussing here. Reyes, did we answer your question? That was probably more than you were asking for. It does not affect the criteria of a show, but I do recognize with the point that was being made in that article. I do think it's an interesting article, interesting example. But it doesn't completely throw Rotten Tomatoes out the window. It's still going to play into part of how we choose movies to cover on this podcast. Oh boy. I don't even know. Usually I have a call to action here for you to jump in the Discord and weigh in on this. I don't even know what to say. What do you think of Rotten Tomatoes? You know what? Go to mrque.com. Type in a movie that you like. Read a few reviews on it. It's nice. I love reading. I'm gonna take my own advice here. I typed in 10 Cloverfield Lane in MRQE as you were discussing it. RodRebird.com. This is, of course, after he passed away, but Brian Tellerico writing there gave it a 3 out of 4. New York Times is here. Real Views. I used to read I just gotta hate read theirs because I never really aligned with them, but they gave it a 3 out of 4. Maybe I'll read some of these reviews, Andrew.
Here's also something, I don't know if you guys were aware of this. You can also read the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Like,
That's
Rotten
true.
Tomatoes links to them. Like, you can go to the critics aggregate, go down, and they're listed there, and it'll usually link you off site to the review itself. So but the thing is, I just, again, it's at a certain point where looking up the reviews, looking up people, finding people, that's work. And it's a lot of work sometimes. And I don't have the time for that anymore, a lot more than I wish I did. But here's the thing. Like what you like. That's all there is to it. And don't like what you don't like. Because you know what?
Like
We're all
what
just
you
trying to
like.
survive.
Like what you like, and next week we're talking about Star Wars. We're talking about Disney Star Wars next week. Woo! It's going to be a fun one, Andrew. Until then. Until the Rise of Skywalker in that discussion. Just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some best of the rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
You had a famous person in your movie. People went to see it. There was a brief.
I'm glad he took that one again, Andrew.
There was a brief period of time.